The town called her worthless. Desperate and starving, she had one choice left: climb a killer mountain trail to deliver supplies to a man they said was dangerous, half mad, and beyond saving. Everyone warned her she wouldn't survive the first trip. They were wrong. What she found in those frozen peaks wasn't death. It was the only person who ever saw her as more than nothing. This is the story of how the woman nobody wanted became the woman nobody could break. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stay until the end. The stagecoach door swung open, and Evelyn Carter stepped down into mud that sucked at her worn boots like the town itself wanted to pull her under. Black Ridge sprawled before her in the gray afternoon light, a collection of weathered buildings clinging to the base of mountains that looked like they'd been carved by something angry. The air smelled like pine smoke and horses, and something else she couldn't name. Failure, maybe. She stood there gripping her father's old trunk, feeling the weight of every eye on the street turn toward her. The silence hit first, then the whispers. A woman in a clean blue dress paused mid-step outside the general store, took one look at Evelyn's hollow cheeks and threadbare coat, and actually pulled her daughter closer. Like poverty was contagious. Two men leaning against a hitching post stopped talking to stare, their expressions cycling through curiosity and contempt before settling on something that made Evelyn's stomach twist. She'd known it would be bad. She hadn't known it would feel this cold. "That's her?" one of the men said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Carter's girl?" "If you can call that a girl," the other one answered. "Looks half dead already." Evelyn pretended not to hear. She'd gotten good at that over the past 6 months, pretending the words didn't land, pretending hunger didn't hurt, pretending she had any idea what she was doing. Her father had been dead since spring, buried in a pauper's grave 2 towns back after his creditors took everything that wasn't nailed down and some things that were. She'd spent the summer running, working when she could, going without when she couldn't, until the last of her money bought her a stagecoach ticket to the one place left that might take her in, Black Ridge, where her mother's brother ran a small ranch on the north edge of town. Uncle Gerald. She'd met him exactly twice in her life, both times when she was too young to remember clearly, but he was family. Blood. That had to count for something, didn't it? The trunk's leather handle bit into her palm as she dragged it forward. Every step felt like walking through a judgment she hadn't asked for. A trio of women gathered near the butcher's shop went quiet when she passed, then erupted in whispers the moment she was supposed to be out of earshot. "Poor thing looks like she hasn't eaten in weeks." "Well, she won't find charity here." "Did you see those shoes? Absolutely disgraceful." Evelyn kept her eyes forward and her chin up, even though everything in her wanted to curl inward and disappear. She'd learned that much from her father. When people were waiting for you to break, you didn't give them the satisfaction, even when you were breaking, especially then. The main street stretched longer than it had any right to, past the saloon where someone was playing piano badly, past the livery stable where a boy mucking out stalls stopped to gawk at her, past the sheriff's office with its peeling paint and a wanted poster flapping in the wind. Every building seemed to lean slightly, like the whole town was tired of holding itself up. She found the general store and pushed inside, grateful for a moment away from the stairs. The man behind the counter looked up from his ledger with the practiced indifference of someone who'd seen every kind of desperate person walk through that door. His eyes traveled from her face to her trunk to her dress, taking inventory, calculating worth. "Help you?" he asked, in a tone that said he probably couldn't. "I'm looking for Gerald Carter's ranch," Evelyn said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Can you give me directions?" Something shifted in the man's expression. Recognition, maybe, or pity. She couldn't tell which and wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Gerald Carter," he repeated slowly. "You family?" "His niece." The man sucked air through his teeth. "Well, he know you're coming?" "I sent a letter 3 weeks ago." He didn't sound convinced that mattered. "Ranch is about 2 miles north. Follow the main road past the church. Take the fork left when you hit the creek. Can't miss it." "Thank you." She was turning to leave when he added, "Miss, you might want to prepare yourself. Gerald's not much for surprise visitors, even family ones." The warning sat heavy in her chest, but she nodded and hauled her trunk back into the street. 2 miles. She could manage 2 miles. The road out of town narrowed quickly, dirt giving way to rocks and ruts that made dragging the trunk feel like hauling an anchor uphill. Her arms burned, her shoulders screamed, but she kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering that she had nowhere else to go, no backup plan, no safety net except the slim hope that blood meant something to a man she barely knew. The creek appeared after what felt like hours, but was probably less than one. She took the left fork like the shopkeeper said, and followed it until she spotted a cabin and a barn set back from the road. Chickens scratched in the yard. A tired-looking horse stood in a small corral. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin gray line. It looked like survival. Nothing more, nothing less. Evelyn approached slowly, suddenly aware of how she must look. Filthy from travel, exhausted, desperate. She set the trunk down near the porch steps and knocked. Footsteps inside. Heavy ones. The door opened and Gerald Carter filled the frame. He was bigger than she remembered, though that wasn't saying much since her memories were mostly impressions. Broad shoulders, thick beard going gray, eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to be surprised by anything. Those eyes landed on her now, and Evelyn watched him go through the same calculations everyone else had. "Uncle Gerald," she started, trying for something that sounded like confidence. "I'm Evelyn, Thomas Carter's daughter. I wrote to you." "I know who you are." His voice was flat. "What are you doing here?" The question hit like a slap, but she forced herself to answer. "My father passed in April. I have nowhere else to go. I was hoping I'd take you in, just until I can find work. I won't be any trouble, I promise. I can cook, clean, help with—" "No." The word dropped between them like a stone. Evelyn blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I said no." Gerald crossed his arms. "I got a reputation in this town. I work hard, keep to myself, don't cause problems. Last thing I need is some charity case niece showing up looking like death and expecting me to fix her life." Something sharp twisted in her chest. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just need a place to sleep, food, money." He shook his head. "I don't owe you that. Your father made his choices and they clearly weren't good ones. That's not my burden to carry." "He was your brother-in-law." "Was, and I barely knew him. You want me to be honest? I don't know you either. You're just some girl who showed up on my doorstep thinking family means I owe you something. Well, I don't." Evelyn felt the world tilting under her feet. "Please, I don't have anywhere else to go." "Then you should have thought of that before you came here." He started to close the door. "There's a boarding house in town. Maybe they'll take you. Good luck." The door shut. Evelyn stood there staring at the weathered wood, her mind refusing to catch up with what had just happened. She'd known it might be difficult. She'd prepared herself for awkwardness, for reluctance, even for conditions and expectations. She hadn't prepared for this. Behind the door, she heard Gerald's footsteps retreating, the scrape of a chair, the clatter of dishes. Life continuing like she'd never been there at all. Her hands were shaking. She picked up her trunk and turned back toward the road, each step feeling heavier than the last. The walk back to town took longer. Everything took longer when you had no idea where you were going. By the time she reached Black Ridge again, the afternoon had faded into early evening. Shadows stretched long across the dirt street. The same people who'd watched her leave now watched her return, and their expressions said they'd expected exactly this. The boarding house sat above the saloon, which Evelyn discovered after asking 3 different people who all gave her the same look, part pity, part disgust, like she was a stray dog that kept showing up where it wasn't wanted. She climbed the outside stairs and knocked. A woman opened the door. 50s, maybe, with steel gray hair pulled back tight and a face that suggested she'd heard every sad story there was and wasn't interested in hearing another one. "Room's $3 a week," she said before Evelyn could speak. "Paid in advance, no men, no drinking, no noise after 9. Evelyn reached for her coin purse and counted what was left. $1.40, everything she had in the world. "I can pay for 3 nights," she said quietly, "and I'll have work by then." The woman's expression didn't change. "Work doing what?" "Anything. Cleaning, cooking, laundry. Town's full of women who can do all that and don't look like they're going to collapse any second. You got any other skills?" Evelyn opened her mouth and closed it again. The truth was she didn't. Her father had been a clerk. Her mother had died when she was 12, and she'd spent her teenage years keeping house, and hoping that would be enough to matter. It hadn't been. "I'm a hard worker," she tried. "So's everyone else who's desperate." The woman sighed, not unkindly. "Look, I'll give you tonight $1, but tomorrow you need to figure something out because I can't run a charity here." "I understand. Thank you." The room was barely bigger than a closet, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked the alley. It smelled like old smoke and other people's lives. Evelyn set her trunk down and sat on the bed, feeling the thin mattress sag under her. She had one night. After that, she was back on the street. The panic that had been building all day finally crashed over her, and she let herself feel it. The fear, the exhaustion, the gut-wrenching loneliness of being completely and utterly alone. She cried quietly, face pressed into her hands, until there was nothing left. Then she washed her face in the basin, straightened her dress, and went downstairs to find work. The saloon was crowded, men drinking, gambling, laughing too loud about things that probably weren't funny. The piano player from earlier was still at it, pounding out something that might have been a song if you were drunk enough. Evelyn spotted the bartender and made her way over, dodging elbows and ignoring the looks that followed her. "I'm looking for work," she told him. He glanced up from the glass he was drying. "What kind?" "Any kind." "Can you serve drinks?" "I can learn." He looked her over and she knew what he was seeing. Someone too thin, too tired, too breakable for a room full of rough men who'd see weakness and exploit it. "Sorry," he said. "Not a good fit." She tried the restaurant next door, the hotel, the laundry, the seamstress. Every door she knocked on gave her the same answer in different words. "No, not you, not here. Try somewhere else." By the time the sun set completely, Evelyn was standing in the middle of the street with her options running out and her money running even faster. That's when she overheard them. Two men outside the general store, talking loud enough that she couldn't help but listen. "Boss, mate, need someone to make the supply run up to Boone's place." "Good luck with that. Nobody's dumb enough to take that job." "Miller's offering 50 cents per trip. 50 cents to climb a trail that's killed 2 people already? To deliver supplies to a crazy hermit who might shoot you just for showing up? Yeah, I'll pass." "Me too, but Miller's getting desperate. Boone hasn't been down in months, and if he doesn't get those supplies, he's not going to keep trading pelts. That's money out of Miller's pocket." 50 cents. Evelyn's heart kicked hard against her ribs. 50 cents per trip. If she could make even 3 trips a week, that was enough to pay for the room and have something left over for food. Maybe more if she proved she could handle it. She didn't let herself think about the part where 2 people had died or the part where the hermit might be dangerous. She was already out of options. This was just another door, and she'd knock on it like all the others. She found Miller in the general store closing up for the night. "I heard you need someone to run supplies," she said. Miller turned, surprised. Then he recognized her, the Carter girl, the one the whole town had already written off. "You?" He laughed, not meanly, just disbelieving. "You know what that job involves? Delivering supplies to someone in the mountains. To Silas Boone, 6 miles up a trail that'll break your neck if you're not careful. And even if you make it, there's no guarantee he won't run you off. Man's not right in the head." "Is he violent?" Miller hesitated. "Not that I've heard, but he's unpredictable. Lost his wife years back and hasn't been the same since. Lives alone, doesn't talk much, comes down maybe twice a year. I've been trading with him for pelts, but he won't come to town anymore, so someone's got to bring the supplies up." "I'll do it." "You sure about that? Trail's steep, rocky, one wrong step and—" "I'll do it," Evelyn repeated, more firmly this time. Miller studied her for a long moment. Then he shrugged. "Your funeral. 50 cents per trip, like I told the others. Supplies ready every Monday and Thursday. You take them up, you come back in one piece, you get paid. Deal?" "Deal." They shook on it, and Evelyn walked out of that store with the first piece of hope she'd felt since stepping off the stagecoach. It didn't matter that everyone said the job was impossible. It didn't matter that the trail was dangerous or the man at the end of it was supposedly half crazy. All that mattered was she had work, a chance, something to hold on to. She went back to the boarding house, paid for another 3 nights, and spent the evening preparing herself for the climb. Monday morning came cold and clear. Evelyn met Miller at dawn, and he loaded her up with a canvas pack full of supplies: flour, coffee, dried beans, salt, tobacco, ammunition. The weight settled across her shoulders like an accusation. Trail starts just past the north edge of town, Miller said. Follow the markers. Don't try to cut corners or you'll get lost. And if Boone tells you to leave, you leave. Don't argue with him. Evelyn nodded, adjusted the straps, and started walking. The first mile wasn't bad. The path was clear, winding through scrub pine and patches of wildflowers that hadn't died off yet. She could still see the town behind her, getting smaller with each step. The second mile got harder. The trail narrowed and started climbing. Her boots slipped on loose rocks. The pack dug into her shoulders, and her legs burned from the incline. By the third mile, she understood why people had died here. The path became a series of switchbacks carved into the side of the mountain, barely wide enough for one person. To her left, the slope rose steep and unforgiving. To her right, it dropped away into nothing, a fall that would kill you before you stopped rolling. Evelyn kept her eyes forward and focused on breathing. One step, then another. Don't look down. Don't think about how far you could fall. Just keep moving. The wind picked up, cold and sharp, cutting through her coat like it wasn't there. Her hands went numb. Her face felt frozen. But she kept climbing because stopping meant giving up, and she'd already lost too much to give up now. 4 miles. 5. The trees thinned out, the air got thinner, every breath felt like it wasn't enough. Then, just when she thought her legs might give out completely, the trail leveled off. And there it was. A cabin tucked into a clearing backed against the mountain itself. Smoke rose from the chimney. A stack of firewood sat beside the door. Animal pelts hung drying on wooden racks. It looked like something out of a story, isolated and impossibly remote. Evelyn approached slowly, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. Alone. Exhausted. Carrying supplies for a man who supposedly didn't want visitors. She stopped a few yards from the door and called out, "Mr. Boone, I have your supplies from Miller's store." Silence. She tried again. "I'm just going to leave them here on the porch. I'll be heading back down." The door opened. The man who stepped out was not what she'd expected. Silas Boone was tall, broad-shouldered, somewhere in his late 30s. Dark hair, dark beard, eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to trust anything. He moved with the kind of careful stillness that came from spending too much time alone. And when he looked at her, Evelyn felt like he was seeing straight through to every fragile, desperate part of her. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, taking her measure the same way everyone else in Black Ridge had. But something about his expression was different. There was no contempt, no pity, just assessment. Like he was trying to figure out what kind of person would climb a mountain like this when everyone else had refused. "You work for Miller?" he finally asked. His voice was rough from disuse, but not unkind. "Yes, sir." "Where's the usual boy?" "There isn't a usual boy. Nobody wanted the job." Silas's eyebrows lifted slightly. "So he sent you?" "I volunteered." "Why?" It was such a simple question, but it hit deeper than she expected. Evelyn could have lied, could have said something about adventure or independence or any number of things that sounded better than the truth. Instead, she heard herself say, "Because I need the work." Something shifted in Silas's expression. Recognition, maybe. The kind that came from understanding what desperation looked like because you'd lived it yourself. He stepped forward, took the pack from her shoulders before she could protest, and carried it inside without a word. Evelyn stood there awkwardly, not sure if she was supposed to follow or leave or what. A moment later, he came back out with the empty pack and a canteen. "Drink," he said, handing her the canteen. "You look half dead." She drank because she was too tired to argue. The water was cold and clean and tasted better than anything she'd had in weeks. "Trail's dangerous when you're tired," Silas continued. "Rest for 10 minutes before you head back. There's a bench around the side." "I'm fine." "You're not. Sit." It wasn't a suggestion. Evelyn found the bench and sat, feeling her body sag with relief. Every muscle ached, her feet throbbed, her lungs burned. But she'd done it. She'd made the climb, delivered the supplies, and survived. Silas came out a few minutes later with a piece of bread wrapped in cloth. "Eat this on the way down," he said, "and tell Miller I'll have pelts ready by Thursday." "Thank you." He nodded and started to turn away, then paused. "What's your name?" "Evelyn Carter." "Carter?" He repeated it like he was filing it away. You planning to keep doing this? As long as Miller needs someone. Silas studied her for another long moment, and Evelyn had the strangest feeling that he was actually seeing her. Not the exhausted, desperate version everyone else saw, but something underneath, something that mattered. Be careful on the way down, he said finally. Trail's worse going downhill. Then he went back inside and closed the door, and Evelyn was alone again. But somehow, the loneliness felt different now. She made it back to Black Ridge before dark, returned the pack to Miller, and collected her 50 cents. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Earned, real. And for the first time since her father died, Evelyn felt like maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. She had no idea that the town's judgment was just beginning, or that the man in the mountains would become the only person who ever truly saw her worth. The whispers started on her second trip. Evelyn had just returned from the mountain, her legs shaking from the descent, when she passed two women outside the seamstress shop. They went quiet the moment they saw her, but their eyes tracked her movement down the street like she was something dirty that had wandered into view. She made it 3 more steps before their voices picked up again, louder this time, loud enough to make sure she heard. Twice in 1 week, going up to see him. It's shameful, really. A young woman, unmarried, visiting a man alone like that. Well, look at her. What else would someone like that have to offer? Evelyn's face burned, but she kept walking. She'd learned that stopping, defending yourself, trying to explain, it never helped. People believed what they wanted to believe, and in Black Ridge, they wanted to believe the worst. By the end of her first month making the supply runs, the rumors had grown teeth. She was selling herself to the mountain man for money. She was living up there in sin. She was crazy like he was. Take your pick. The town had a story for every occasion, each one worse than the last. The boarding house owner started giving her looks when she paid her weekly rent. The bartender stopped acknowledging her when she walked past the saloon. Even the kids playing in the street would point and giggle when she hauled her supply pack through town, like she was part of some joke only they understood. Miller, at least, didn't care about gossip. He cared that his pelts kept coming, and his customers stayed satisfied. As long as Evelyn showed up on time and Silas kept trading, the rest was noise. But the noise got harder to ignore. One Thursday morning, Evelyn was loading her pack outside Miller's store when a woman she'd never spoken to approached her. Mid-40s, wearing a clean dress and an expression that said she was doing her Christian duty by saying something. You should be ashamed of yourself, the woman said, not even bothering with a greeting. Evelyn looked up, startled. Excuse me? Parading yourself up that mountain like some kind of... She paused, searching for a word that wouldn't make her sound uncharitable. She didn't find one. Well, everyone knows what you're doing up there. Delivering supplies. Is that what you're calling it? Heat flooded Evelyn's chest, equal parts embarrassment and anger. That's what I'm doing. If people want to imagine something else, that's their problem. It becomes everyone's problem when you're making a mockery of decent behavior. You're a young, unmarried woman spending time alone with a man who has no business being around anyone, let alone someone like you. Someone like me, Evelyn repeated slowly. The woman's mouth thinned. You know what I mean? You come here with nothing, no family willing to claim you, taking work that no respectable person would touch. And now this. It reflects poorly on all of us. I'm just trying to survive. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you put yourself in this position. The woman walked away before Evelyn could respond, leaving her standing there with her hands shaking and her throat tight. She wanted to scream. Wanted to grab that woman by her clean collar and ask her what the hell she was supposed to do instead. Starve quietly? Disappear? Die somewhere convenient so nobody had to look at her? Instead, she shouldered her pack and headed for the trail. The climb had gotten easier over the weeks. Her legs were stronger now, her lungs adjusted to the thin air. She knew which rocks were loose, which switchbacks were worst in the wind, where to stop and catch her breath without losing momentum. The mountain had started to feel less like a punishment and more like an escape. When she reached Silas's cabin, he was outside splitting wood. He'd become predictable in his routine, which Evelyn found oddly comforting. Mondays and Thursdays, she'd arrive and he'd be doing something. Chopping wood, checking traps, working on pelts. He'd nod, take the supplies, sometimes offer her water or a few minutes rest. They didn't talk much. Silas wasn't a man built for conversation. But he also wasn't cruel, wasn't dismissive, wasn't looking at her like she was something broken or shameful. That alone made the climb worth it. Today, though, something was different. Silas took one look at her face and set down his axe. "What happened?" he asked. Evelyn blinked, surprised. "Nothing. I'm fine." "You're not." "It's nothing," she insisted, shrugging off the pack. "Just the usual." "The usual what?" She hesitated, then sighed. There was no point in lying to someone who could apparently read her that easily. "The town doesn't like that I'm doing this job. They think I'm coming up here for reasons that aren't about delivering supplies." Silas's expression darkened. "What reasons?" "Does it matter? People talk. That's what they do." "It matters if they're making your life harder." Evelyn let out a short, bitter laugh. "My life was already hard. This is just more of the same." Silas studied her for a moment, then gestured toward the cabin. "Come inside. I'll make coffee." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm offering." It was the first time he'd invited her in, and Evelyn wasn't sure what surprised her more, the invitation itself or how much she wanted to accept it. The cabin was smaller than it looked from outside, but cleaner than she'd expected. One main room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, a narrow bed pushed against the far wall, shelves lined with books, tools, supplies. Pelts in various stages of preparation. It smelled like wood smoke and leather, and something earthy she couldn't quite place. Silas poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed her one. The heat felt good against her cold hands. "How bad is it?" he asked, settling into a chair across from her. "The gossip?" "Yeah." Evelyn wrapped her fingers around the cup, weighing how much to say. "Bad enough. Women won't talk to me. Men think I'm fair game for comments I'd rather not repeat. The boarding house owner looks at me like I'm going to corrupt her establishment just by existing in it." "You tell them the truth?" "I tried. They don't care." Silas took a slow sip of his coffee, his expression unreadable. "People in that town are good at one thing, making each other miserable. They did the same to me when my wife died. Couldn't handle that I wanted to grieve alone instead of putting on a show for them. So they decided I was crazy, dangerous. Easier to believe that than accept that maybe I just didn't want to be around them anymore." It was the most he'd ever said at once, and Evelyn found herself leaning forward slightly, caught by the rawness in his voice. "Why'd you come up here?" she asked quietly. "Because down there, everyone wanted to tell me how to feel, how long to mourn, when to move on. Like grief has a schedule." He stared into his cup. "Up here, nobody tells me anything. I can feel what I feel and not have to explain it." "That sounds lonely." "It is. But it's better than being surrounded by people who don't see you." Evelyn understood that more than she wanted to admit. "The town doesn't see me either. They just see someone they can judge." "Then stop caring what they see. That's easier said than done." "I know." Silas met her eyes. "But you keep climbing this mountain twice a week, even though it's killing you. You're stronger than you think." Something in Evelyn's chest twisted at that. Not pity, not flattery, just a simple observation from someone who'd watched her prove it over and over. "Thank you," she said softly. Silas nodded and stood. "I've got pelts ready for Miller. Help me load them?" They worked together in a silence that felt comfortable rather than awkward, bundling the furs and securing them to the pack. When they finished, Silas walked her to the edge of the clearing. "Be careful going down," he said, same as always. But this time he added, "And Evelyn, don't let them make you small. You're worth more than their gossip." The words stayed with her the entire descent. 2 weeks later, everything got worse. Evelyn was cutting through an alley behind the general store when 3 men stepped out from the shadows. She recognized 2 of them, ranch hands who drank at the saloon and made a habit of saying crude things whenever she passed. The third one she didn't know, but his smile made her stomach drop. "Well, look who it is," the first one said. He was tall, broad, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. The mountain man's little whore. Evelyn's heart kicked into her throat, but she kept her voice level. "Get out of my way." "That's not very friendly." He took a step closer. "We've been watching you, twice a week, up and down that trail. Must be some kind of arrangement you've got going." "I deliver supplies, that's all." "Sure you do." The second man laughed. "And I bet he pays you real well for those supplies." "Move," Evelyn said again, trying to step around them. The scarred one grabbed her arm. Let go of me. We figure if Boone's getting what he wants, why shouldn't we? You're already selling it. Might as well spread the business around. Fear spiked through her, sharp and immediate. Evelyn yanked her arm free and backed up, but there were 3 of them, and one of her, and the alley was narrow, and nobody was around to hear if she screamed. You touch me and You'll what? The third man grinned. Tell the sheriff? He's not going to believe some desperate girl over us. Everyone knows what you are. They closed in, and Evelyn's mind went blank with panic. She looked for an exit, a weapon, anything. A voice cut through the air like a gunshot. Step away from her. All 4 of them turned. Silas stood at the mouth of the alley, and Evelyn had never seen him look like this. There was something coiled in his posture, something dangerous in his eyes that said he'd spent years alone in the mountains dealing with things more threatening than drunk ranch hands. The scarred man sneered. This doesn't concern you, Boone. She works for me. That makes it my concern. She works for you. Right. The man's tone was mocking. We all know what kind of work that is. Silas moved so fast, Evelyn almost missed it. 1 second he was standing still, the next he had the scarred man by the throat, slammed against the alley wall hard enough to knock the breath out of him. Say that again, Silas said quietly. I want to make sure I heard you right before I break your jaw. The other 2 men started forward, but Silas didn't even look at them. You want to try me? He asked, his voice flat and cold. Go ahead, but understand that I've spent the last 5 years alone on a mountain with nothing but time to think about how much I don't care what happens to me. You really want to test how far I'll go? They didn't. The scarred man wheezed something that might have been an apology, and Silas released him. All 3 of them scrambled out of the alley like dogs that had been kicked, leaving Evelyn and Silas alone in the shadows. Evelyn's legs felt like water. She leaned against the wall trying to catch her breath. You okay? Silas asked, his voice gentler now. I think so. They hurt you? No, you got here before... Her voice cracked. Thank you. Silas looked like he wanted to say something, then thought better of it. Instead, he just stood there, solid and steady, while Evelyn pulled herself together. What are you doing in town? She finally asked. Needed to talk to Miller about a trade. Saw you heading into the alley and had a feeling. Good timing. Yeah. He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. Listen, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Those men aren't going to keep quiet about what happened. Town's going to talk. They already talk. Not like this. Now they're going to say I'm protecting you. That we're... He trailed off, looking frustrated. You understand what I'm saying? Evelyn did. And the worst part was she didn't know if she cared anymore. The town had already decided who she was. Maybe it was time to stop trying to convince them otherwise. Let them talk, she said. Silas looked surprised. You sure about that? No, but I'm tired of being afraid of what they think. She straightened, feeling something shift in her chest. I need this job. I need to survive. If that means being the subject of their gossip, then fine. I'll be their scandal, but I won't let them run me out of town. Something like respect flickered in Silas's eyes. All right then. He walked her back to the boarding house, and sure enough, people stared. By morning, the whole town would know that Silas Boone had defended Evelyn Carter in an alley, that he'd threatened 3 men over her, that they'd walk through the streets together like it meant something. The rumors exploded. Within a week, the boarding house owner told Evelyn she needed to find somewhere else to stay. Too much attention, she said. Bad for business. Evelyn had 2 days to pack her things and leave. The restaurant where she sometimes bought meals stopped serving her. The laundry refused her business. Even Miller started giving her uncomfortable looks when she picked up supplies, though he didn't fire her. The pelts were too valuable. Evelyn found herself pushed further and further to the edges of Black Ridge society until she was barely part of it at all. And then her uncle showed up. Gerald Carter appeared at the boarding house on her last day there, accompanied by the sheriff. Evelyn was carrying her trunk downstairs when she saw them waiting in the common room. Evelyn, Gerald said, his voice heavy with false concern, we need to talk. About what? About you and Silas Boone. The sheriff stepped forward. He was older, with a gray mustache and eyes that had seen enough trouble to be tired of it. Miss Carter, there's been complaints. Concerns about your relationship with Mr. Boone. There is no relationship, Evelyn said flatly. I work for him, that's all. That's not what people are saying. People say a lot of things. Most of them aren't true. Gerald cut in, trying to sound reasonable. Look, I know we didn't part on good terms when you first arrived, but you're still family, and I can't stand by while you ruin what's left of your reputation. You told me I wasn't your problem. That was before you started associating with a man like Boone. Do you have any idea what people think? What they're saying about you? I know exactly what they're saying. They've been saying it for weeks. The sheriff sighed. Miss Carter, I'm going to be direct with you. There's talk that Boone is taking advantage of you. That maybe you're not going up that mountain willingly. Evelyn stared at him. You think he's forcing me? I think you're young, alone, and desperate. I think a man like Boone could easily manipulate someone in your position. A man like Boone, Evelyn repeated, anger rising in her throat. You mean a man who's only ever treated me with respect? Who pays me fairly for work and doesn't look at me like I'm worthless? That kind of man? He's dangerous. He's not. You just decided he was because he doesn't want anything to do with this town. Gerald stepped closer, lowering his voice like that would make this better. Come stay at the ranch, just for a while. Get away from Boone, let things settle down. People will forget if you give them time. You're offering me a place now, after you slammed the door in my face? I'm trying to help you. No, you're trying to save your reputation. You don't care about me. You care about what people think when they hear Gerald Carter's niece is involved with the crazy mountain man. The sheriff's expression hardened. Miss Carter, if we find out Boone is holding you against your will, he's not. Then prove it. Come down from that mountain and stay away from him. Evelyn felt something break loose inside her, all the fear and anger and exhaustion of the past months rising up in a wave she couldn't hold back. I'm not going to prove anything to you, she said, her voice shaking. I'm not going to stop working just because this town doesn't like it, and I'm not going to let you use me to go after Silas because you've decided he's a problem. You're making a mistake, Gerald warned. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. She picked up her trunk and walked out, leaving both of them standing there. She had nowhere to go. The boarding house was done with her. Every other place in town had made it clear she wasn't welcome. She had maybe $3 to her name and a job that wouldn't pay again until Monday. Evelyn stood in the street with her trunk at her feet and no plan whatsoever. Then she thought about the cabin, the mountain, the one place where she'd felt less like something broken and more like someone who mattered. It was insane. She knew it was insane, but she was out of sane options. She hired a boy with a mule to help haul her trunk up the trail. Cost her $1 she couldn't afford to spend, but there was no way she could carry it herself. They climbed in silence, the boy clearly thinking she was out of her mind, but willing to keep his mouth shut for the money. When they reached the clearing, Silas was outside. He looked up, saw Evelyn and her trunk, and his expression went carefully neutral. I'll take it from here, he told the boy, handing him an extra quarter. Head back down before dark. The boy left, and Silas turned to Evelyn. What's going on? The boarding house kicked me out. Gerald and the sheriff showed up trying to convince me you're corrupting me or holding me hostage or something equally ridiculous. I have nowhere else to go. The words came out in a rush. I know this is asking too much. I know it's going to make everything worse, but I need... You can stay here. Evelyn stopped. What? You can stay here, Silas repeated. There's a storage room off the main cabin. I can clear it out, make it livable. It's small, but it's shelter. Silas, if I stay here, the town is going to... The town's already made up their mind about both of us. Doesn't matter what we do at this point. He picked up her trunk like it weighed nothing. Might as well give you a place to sleep. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Why are you doing this? Silas looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, something like vulnerability crossed his face. Because I know what it's like to have nowhere to go, he said quietly. And because you climbed this mountain every week even when it was killing you. That takes strength. I respect that. The sheriff thinks you're taking advantage of me. Let him think what he wants. Are you afraid of me? No. Then that's all that matters. He carried her trunk inside, and Evelyn followed, feeling like she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The town would explode when they found out. Gerald would probably try to get the sheriff involved again. Miller might even fire her to distance himself from the scandal. But standing in that cabin with the fire crackling and Silas clearing space for her like it was the most natural thing in the world, Evelyn realized something. For the first time since her father died, she wasn't alone. And maybe that was worth whatever came next. The storage room wasn't much, barely 10 feet across with a single window that looked out toward the valley. But Silas worked through the evening, clearing out old traps and equipment, sweeping the floor, patching a crack in the wall where wind whistled through. He brought in a small bed frame he'd been storing in the barn, a wool blanket that smelled like cedar, and a lamp for the nights. Evelyn stood in the doorway watching him work, feeling awkward and grateful in equal measure. "You don't have to do all this," she said. "I know." He didn't look up from hammering a loose board back into place. "But if you're staying, you need a decent place to sleep." "Silas, stop thanking me. You've already done it 3 times. She closed her mouth and helped him carry in her trunk instead. When they finished, the room looked almost livable. Sparse, but clean. A place that could maybe become hers if she let it. That night they ate dinner at the small table in the main room. Venison stew Silas had made earlier, and bread that was dense but edible. The silence between them felt different now that she was staying. Heavier. Like they were both aware they'd crossed into territory neither of them had mapped out yet. "There's rules if you're living here," Silas said finally, setting down his spoon. "All right. You pull your weight. I'm not running a charity. You want to stay, you work. Hunting, trapping, maintaining the cabin, whatever needs doing. I can do that. You keep your space clean and you don't touch my things without asking. I like my privacy." "Understood." He paused, looking uncomfortable. "And if the town comes up here causing trouble, you let me handle it. Don't try to defend me or explain anything. Just stay out of it." "Why?" "Because I don't need defending, and you trying to do it will only make things worse." His expression softened slightly. "I can handle people hating me. I've been doing it for years, but I don't want them taking it out on you." Evelyn met his eyes. "They're already taking it out on me. That's why I'm here. I know. And I'm sorry for that. Don't be. I made my choice." Silas nodded slowly, like he was filing that information away somewhere important. Then he stood and started clearing the dishes. The first week was harder than Evelyn expected. Living alongside someone was different from visiting them twice a week. It meant navigating routines, learning boundaries, figuring out how to exist in the same space without stepping on each other. Silas woke before dawn and expected her to do the same. He didn't talk much in the mornings, just moved through his tasks with quiet efficiency while Evelyn tried to keep up. He taught her how to set snares for rabbits, how to skin and prepare game, how to recognize animal tracks in the mud. The work was brutal. Her hands split open from the cold and the rough work. Her back ached from hauling firewood. Every muscle in her body protested the physical demands of mountain life. But she learned. And slowly, the cabin started to feel less like a temporary shelter and more like something she couldn't quite name yet. The town, predictably, lost its mind. Miller came up the trail 3 weeks after Evelyn moved in, red-faced and out of breath from the climb. Silas met him at the edge of the clearing with his rifle resting casually in the crook of his arm, not aimed, but present. "Boone," Miller panted, "we need to talk." "About what?" "About the Carter girl. Is she here?" "That's none of your business." "The hell it's not. The whole town's talking. Her uncle's causing a scene, the sheriff's asking questions, and I've got people refusing to trade with me because they think I'm involved in whatever's going on up here." Silas's expression didn't change. "Sounds like a town problem, not a mountain problem." "It's my problem when it affects my business. Is she staying here or not?" "She's working for me. Where she sleeps isn't your concern." Miller's face went redder. "Working for you. Right. Look, Boone, I don't care what you do up here, but this is making things complicated. Maybe you could—" "No. You don't even know what I was going to say." "Doesn't matter. Answer's still no." Silas shifted slightly, the rifle adjusting with him. "You want the pelts or not? Because if you're here to tell me how to live, you can head back down and find yourself another trapper." Miller looked like he wanted to argue, then thought better of it. The pelts were too good, too profitable. He couldn't afford to lose Silas as a supplier. "Fine," he muttered, "but don't expect me to defend you when the town comes after you both." Never did. Miller left, and Silas stood there until the man disappeared down the trail. Then he turned and found Evelyn standing in the cabin doorway. "You heard all that?" he asked. "Most of it." "You understand what it means? Miller's backing off. Soon everyone else will too. We'll be completely cut off." Evelyn had already thought about this, had spent nights lying awake in her small room weighing the consequences of staying. "We can be self-sufficient. You've been doing it for years." "I have. You haven't." "Then I'll learn." Something flickered across Silas's face. Surprise, maybe, or something close to it. "You're really not going back, are you?" "Where would I go? Back to a town that's decided I'm worthless? Back to an uncle who only cares about me when it affects his reputation?" She shook her head. "At least up here, I'm useful." "You're more than useful." The words came out quiet, almost involuntary, and they both felt the weight of them hanging in the air between them. Silas cleared his throat and looked away. "I'm going to check the traps. You coming?" Evelyn grabbed her coat. 2 months passed, and winter started creeping down from the higher peaks. The work got harder. The days got shorter. Evelyn learned how to split firewood without taking off a finger, how to preserve meat for the cold months ahead, how to read the sky for storms. Silas pushed her relentlessly, but never cruelly. He seemed to understand that she needed to prove herself, to him, to herself, to the town that had written her off. And somewhere in the middle of all that survival, things between them shifted. It started small. Silas making extra coffee in the mornings and leaving a cup for her. Evelyn mending a tear in his coat without being asked. Small gestures that felt bigger than they were because neither of them was used to being cared for. Then one evening, after a long day of hauling supplies and reinforcing the barn before the heavy snows came, they sat by the fire and Silas started talking. Not about work or the weather or practical things, about his wife. "Her name was Anna," he said, staring into the flames. "Met her when I was 23. She was the daughter of a shopkeeper 2 towns over from where I grew up. Smart, stubborn as hell. Laughed at things that weren't even funny just because she liked the sound of it." Evelyn listened quietly, afraid that speaking would break whatever spell had made him willing to share this. "We got married fast. Too fast, probably. But I loved her, and she loved me, and that felt like enough." He paused, his jaw working. "We tried for a baby for 3 years. When it finally happened, we were so happy. Thought everything was finally coming together the way it was supposed to." His voice cracked on the last word. Labor went on for 2 days. The midwife kept saying it was normal, that first babies took time, but I could see something was wrong. Anna kept getting weaker. And then finally the baby came, and it wasn't breathing right, and Anna was bleeding, and he stopped, breathing hard through his nose. They both died, he finished quietly. My wife and my son, gone before I could even hold him. Evelyn's throat felt tight. "I'm so sorry." Everyone was sorry. The whole damn town was sorry. They brought food and flowers and prayers, and none of it meant anything because sorry doesn't bring people back. His hands clenched into fists. I couldn't stay there. Couldn't walk past the house we'd picked out for our family. Couldn't listen to one more person tell me it was part of some greater plan. So I came up here and I stayed. How long ago was that? 7 years? 7 years alone on this mountain, carrying grief that had no outlet. Evelyn couldn't imagine it. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Coming up here?" Silas thought about that. "No, I needed the quiet. Needed to feel something other than anger at everyone trying to make me feel better. But," he hesitated, "it's been lonely. More than I expected." "I understand that." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "I know you do. That's why I let you stay." The fire crackled between them, and Evelyn felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction exactly, or not just that. Something deeper. Recognition. The kind that came from understanding someone's scars because you had your own. "Thank you for telling me," she said. Silas nodded and stood. "I'm going to turn in. You should too. Storm's coming tomorrow." But before he left, he paused at the doorway to her room. "Evelyn?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you're here." Then he was gone, and Evelyn sat there staring at the fire, feeling like something fundamental had just changed. The storm hit 3 days later with a violence that shocked her. Wind screamed down from the peaks like something alive and furious. Snow fell so thick she couldn't see the barn from the cabin window. The temperature dropped so fast that the water bucket froze solid within an hour. Silas moved through the cabin, securing shutters, banking the fire higher, pulling out extra blankets and supplies. He'd been through this before, knew how to prepare, how to survive when the mountain tried to kill you. "How long will it last?" Evelyn asked, watching the storm rage outside. "Could be 3 days, could be a week. No way to know. We have enough supplies. If we're smart about it." They were trapped, completely cut off from the rest of the world with nothing but each other and the howling wind. The first day wasn't bad. They kept busy with indoor tasks, mending clothes, organizing supplies, maintaining equipment. The second day was harder. Cabin fever started creeping in, that restless feeling that came from being stuck in one place with nowhere to go. By the third day, the cold had gotten so severe that Silas started worrying about the fire going out overnight. "We're burning through firewood faster than I expected," he said, checking their supply. "And I can't get to the woodpile outside without risking frostbite. What do we do?" He looked uncomfortable. "We conserve heat. That means staying close to the fire and—" He paused. "We might need to share body heat tonight, just to be safe." Evelyn felt her face flush, but she knew he was right. She'd already woken up shivering the past 2 mornings despite the extra blankets. "All right," she said, trying to sound practical about it. That night they dragged Silas's mattress closer to the fireplace and piled it with every blanket they had. They lay down together fully clothed, back to back at first, maintaining as much distance as the small space allowed. It didn't work. The cold crept in through every gap, and Evelyn's teeth started chattering within an hour. "This is stupid," Silas muttered. "Come here." He pulled her against him, wrapping his arms around her and tucking her head under his chin. The sudden warmth was startling, not just physical heat, but something else, something that made her heart beat faster. "Better?" he asked, his voice rumbling through his chest. "Yeah." They lay like that for a long time, listening to the storm rage outside and the fire pop in the hearth. Evelyn had never been held like this, not since she was a child, and even then, only rarely. Her father hadn't been the affectionate type, but this felt different, safe, like Silas was building a wall between her and everything that wanted to hurt her. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Go ahead." "Why did you really let me stay? The truth." Silas was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Because when you showed up that first time, half dead from the climb, you could have turned around, could have quit, but you didn't. You kept coming back even when everyone told you not to, and I thought—" He stopped. "I thought maybe if someone that stubborn stuck around, I might remember what it felt like to be alive instead of just surviving." Evelyn's breath caught. "Has it worked?" "Yeah," he said softly. "It has." She turned in his arms so she could see his face. The firelight threw shadows across his features, made his eyes look darker, more vulnerable. "I was so angry when I came here," she admitted. "Angry at my father for dying, angry at the town for judging me, angry at myself for not being strong enough to fight back. But up here, with you, I'm not angry anymore." "What are you?" She thought about it. "Hopeful, maybe for the first time in my life." Something shifted in Silas's expression. His hand came up, hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair away from her face. The gesture was so gentle, it made her chest ache. "I haven't felt hope in 7 years, he said quietly. "Didn't think I'd ever feel it again. Do you feel it now?" "I'm starting to." They were close enough that Evelyn could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, could feel his breath against her skin. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Silas pulled back first. "We should sleep," he said, his voice rough. "Storm's not done with us yet." He turned away, and Evelyn lay there staring at his back, her heart racing. Nothing had happened. Not really. But something had changed. The storm finally broke on the 5th day, leaving the world buried under 3 feet of snow. They dug themselves out slowly, clearing paths to the barn and the woodpile, checking that the animals had survived. Everything was white and silent and impossibly beautiful. Evelyn stood in the clearing, breathing in the cold air, feeling like she'd survived something more than just weather. Silas came up beside her, his breath making clouds in the frigid air. "You did good," he said. "A lot of people wouldn't have made it through a storm like that their first winter. I had help. Still, you're tougher than you look." Evelyn glanced at him. Is that a compliment? Yeah. You're terrible at those. The corner of his mouth twitched. I'm out of practice. They worked together throughout the morning, falling into a rhythm that felt natural now. Evelyn knew where things went, knew what needed doing without being told. The cabin had become familiar. The mountain had become home. And Silas had become something she didn't have words for yet. That evening, as they sat by the fire, she caught him looking at her. Not the way the men in town had looked at her, like she was something to judge or take advantage of. This was different, like he was seeing her for the first time and being surprised by what he found. What? She asked. Nothing. Silas, he sighed. I was just thinking that I didn't expect this. Expect what? You. Here. The way things have... He stopped, frustrated with his inability to articulate what he meant. I thought I was done with people. Thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone up here, and that would be fine. But now you're here, and it's... different? Yeah. Evelyn set down the sock she'd been mending. Is that a bad thing? I don't know yet. She understood his hesitation. This was dangerous territory for both of them. They'd built something fragile here. A friendship, a partnership, maybe something more. And neither of them wanted to break it by pushing too hard. But the feelings were there, growing stronger every day. We don't have to figure it out tonight, she said carefully. No, we don't. But they both knew they'd have to figure it out eventually. But winter deepened and the isolation became absolute. No one came up the mountain anymore. Miller had stopped trying. The town had probably written them both off as lost causes by now. Evelyn didn't care. She was learning things she'd never imagined. How to track deer through snow. How to cure pelts properly. How to survive on almost nothing when supplies ran low. But more than that, she was learning about Silas. He talked more now. Told her stories about his childhood, about learning to trap from his grandfather, about the years before Anna. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard sometimes. He was patient when teaching her things, even when she messed up repeatedly. And he had moments of surprising gentleness, like when he'd found a bird with a broken wing and spent an entire evening splinting it, or when he'd saved the last of the good coffee for her because he knew she loved it. They fell into routines that felt almost domestic. Cooking together, sitting by the fire in the evenings, sharing silence that didn't need to be filled. And at night, after that first storm, they kept sharing the bed near the fireplace. Neither of them suggested going back to separate sleeping arrangements. It was warmer this way, they told themselves, more practical. But practical didn't explain the way Evelyn's pulse jumped when Silas's arm settled around her waist. Didn't explain the way he'd started running his fingers through her hair while they talked, like he'd forgotten he was doing it. The tension between them built slowly, carefully, like something neither of them wanted to rush but couldn't fully ignore. Then one night in late January, everything shifted again. They'd been lying together for over an hour, not sleeping, just existing in the quiet. Evelyn could tell Silas was still awake by the way he was breathing. I need to tell you something, he said finally. Her heart kicked. All right. When you first came here, I thought you'd last maybe 2 weeks. Thought the mountain would break you or the town would scare you off. But you kept showing up, kept proving everyone wrong, including me. I'm stubborn. You're brave. His arm tightened around her. And somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of you as the girl who delivered supplies and started thinking of you as... He stopped, and Evelyn turned to face him. As what? The firelight caught in his eyes, and she saw fear there, real fear, the kind that came from knowing you were about to risk something you couldn't afford to lose. As mine, he finished quietly. Evelyn's breath caught. Silas, I know it's wrong. I know you're young, and you came here because you had nowhere else to go, and I shouldn't feel this way about someone who depends on me for survival. But I can't help it. When I wake up and you're here, I feel... He struggled with the words. I feel like maybe I'm allowed to be happy again. It's not wrong, Evelyn said, her voice shaking. And I'm not here because I have nowhere else to go anymore. I'm here because this is where I want to be, with you. You sure about that? I've never been more sure of anything. Silas pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. This is going to make everything more complicated. I know. The town's going to have a field day when they find out. Let them. He laughed quietly, the sound rough and surprised. Then his hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said. "If you don't want that, you need to tell me." Evelyn answered by closing the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like neither of them quite believed this was happening. Then it deepened, and Evelyn felt 7 months of loneliness and fear and desperate hope pour into it. Silas kissed her like she was something precious he'd thought he'd lost forever. Like she mattered more than anything. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers again. "I'm falling in love with you," he whispered. "I think I have been for a while now." Evelyn's eyes burned with tears she didn't try to hide. "I already fell, weeks ago." "Yeah?" "Yeah." He kissed her again, slower this time, and Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. Something that felt like belonging, like home. They didn't sleep much that night, just held each other and talked and kissed and made promises neither of them knew if they could keep, but wanted to try anyway. By morning, everything had changed, and when Silas looked at her across the breakfast table with something soft in his eyes, Evelyn knew there was no going back. Whatever came next, judgment, isolation, hardship, they'd face it together. And that was enough. Spring came late to the mountain that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought something Evelyn hadn't expected. They'd been living as more than friends for 3 months, and the change had been both subtle and profound. Silas smiled more. Evelyn felt less like she was constantly bracing for the next disaster. They'd settled into a rhythm that felt right, working during the day, talking by the fire at night, falling asleep wrapped around each other like they'd been doing it for years instead of months. Then one morning in early April, Evelyn woke up and immediately had to run outside to vomit. Silas found her 20 minutes later, sitting on the porch steps looking pale and shaky. "You all right?" he asked, concern creasing his forehead. "I think so. Maybe something I ate didn't agree with me." "What'd you have for dinner last night?" "Same thing you did." He frowned. "I feel fine." Evelyn did too, actually. Apart from the nausea, she felt normal. It passed within an hour, and she went about her day like nothing had happened, until it happened again the next morning. And the morning after that. On the 4th day, Silas sat her down at the table with a cup of weak tea and a look that said he'd figured something out that she hadn't yet. "When was your last monthly?" he asked quietly. Evelyn opened her mouth to answer and realized she couldn't remember. She'd been so focused on surviving, on learning, on the unexpected shift in her relationship with Silas that she hadn't been paying attention to her body's rhythms. She counted backwards in her head. Once, twice, a third time because the number couldn't be right. 10 weeks, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe 11. Silas went very still. "You're sure?" "I think so. I didn't think to keep track because..." She stopped, the implications hitting her all at once. "Oh." They sat there in silence, the magnitude of it settling between them like something physical. "Could be stress," Silas said finally. "You've been through a lot. Sometimes that throws things off. Or I could be pregnant." The word hung in the air, and Evelyn watched Silas's face cycle through a dozen emotions in the span of seconds. Shock, fear, something that might have been hope if hope didn't look so terrified. "If you are," he started, then stopped. Tried again. "If you are, we need to make a plan." "What kind of plan?" "Marriage, for one thing." He said it matter of fact, like it was the most obvious solution in the world. "Won't stop the town from talking, but at least it'll be legal. Give the baby a name." Evelyn's heart was pounding. "You want to marry me?" "I was going to ask anyway. Was just waiting for the right time." He reached across the table and took her hand. "This isn't how I planned it, but yeah, I want to marry you if you'll have me." "Silas, if I'm pregnant, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." His grip tightened. "I love you. That doesn't change whether there's a baby or not. So what do you say?" Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. She'd spent so long believing nobody would ever want her, that she'd always be the girl nobody chose. And here was this man offering her everything without hesitation. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes." Silas let out a breath he'd been holding and pulled her into his arms. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other while the reality of what came next started to sink in. Getting married required going back to town. They made the trip down 2 weeks later, both of them tense and silent. Evelyn's stomach had settled slightly, though she still felt queasy most mornings. They hadn't confirmed the pregnancy. There was no way to do that up on the mountain. But she knew, could feel it in the way her body felt different, foreign. Black Ridge looked the same as always. Mud and worn buildings and people who stopped what they were doing to stare when Silas and Evelyn walked down the main street together. The whispers started immediately. "Is that the Carter girl? With Boone? In broad daylight?" Shameless, absolutely shameless. Silas kept his hand on the small of Evelyn's back, a silent statement of solidarity. They went straight to the courthouse where a judge could perform the ceremony. The judge was an older man with spectacles and an expression that suggested he'd heard every story there was and wasn't impressed by any of them. He looked at Silas and Evelyn and raised an eyebrow. "You two want to get married," he said. Not a question. "Yes, sir," Silas answered. "You understand marriage is a legal contract? Can't just walk away when things get difficult." "We understand." The judge turned to Evelyn. "Miss, you're doing this of your own free will? Nobody's forcing you?" "I'm doing this because I want to," Evelyn said firmly. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then. You need 2 witnesses." That proved harder than expected. They stood outside the courthouse for 20 minutes while people walked past, pretending not to see them. Finally, Miller showed up, drawn by curiosity or conscience, Evelyn wasn't sure, and agreed to stand as one witness. The courthouse clerk grudgingly agreed to be the second. The ceremony itself took less than 5 minutes. No flowers, no music, no celebration, just words spoken in a dusty office while 2 reluctant witnesses watched, and the judge recited the legal requirements with all the warmth of someone reading a shopping list. But when Silas said, "I do," and looked at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered, Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. When it was her turn, she said the words clearly, without hesitation. The judge pronounced them married, and Silas kissed her in front of everyone with something like defiance in the gesture. They signed the papers, the judge filed them, and just like that, Evelyn Carter became Evelyn Boone. Walking out of that courthouse as a married woman felt surreal. The town had gathered, not to celebrate, but to witness their scandal made official. Women clutched their shawls tighter and whispered behind their hands. Men shook their heads like they were watching a train wreck. Gerald was there, standing near the general store with the sheriff beside him. When he saw Evelyn, something complicated crossed his face. "Evelyn," he called out, "can I talk to you?" Silas tensed, but Evelyn touched his arm. "It's all right." She walked over to her uncle while Silas stayed close enough to intervene if needed. Gerald looked older than she remembered, tired. "You really did it," he said. "I really did. You know what people are saying? That he took advantage of you, that you didn't have a choice. I know what they're saying. They're wrong." "Are they?" Gerald's voice dropped. "You came here desperate and alone. You took the only work nobody else would touch. And now you're married to a man twice your age who lives like a hermit. You telling me that's what you wanted?" Evelyn met his eyes. "I'm telling you that Silas Boone is the only person in this entire town who ever treated me like I mattered. So yes, marrying him is exactly what I wanted. And when you get tired of living on that mountain, when winter comes and you're isolated and miserable, then I'll still have a husband who loves me, which is more than I'd have if I'd listened to you." Gerald flinched. "I was trying to protect you." "No, you were trying to protect your reputation. There's a difference." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I forgive you for turning me away. It brought me to exactly where I needed to be." She walked back to Silas, who was watching the exchange with barely controlled tension. "We done here?" he asked. "We're done." They left Black Ridge together, and Evelyn didn't look back. The pregnancy became undeniable as spring turned to summer. Evelyn's body changed in ways that both fascinated and terrified her. Her stomach began to round. Her breasts ached. She cried at things that shouldn't have made her emotional: a bird building a nest, Silas fixing her boots without being asked, the way the sunset looked through the cabin window. And Silas was scared in a way she'd never seen him scared before. He tried to hide it at first, threw himself into preparing the cabin, building a proper cradle, gathering supplies they'd need for winter. But Evelyn could see it in the way his hands shook sometimes when he looked at her growing belly, in the way he'd wake in the middle of the night and check that she was still breathing. One evening in late June, she found him sitting on the porch with his head in his hands. "Talk to me," she said, settling beside him. "I can't do this again," he said quietly. "I can't watch someone I love die in childbirth. I won't survive it a second time." Evelyn's heart cracked. "I'm not Anna." "I know, but that doesn't make it less terrifying." He looked at her, and his eyes were wet. "What if something goes wrong? We're 6 miles from the nearest doctor. If you start bleeding or the baby gets stuck or—" "Silas, stop." "I can't stop. I've been thinking about it constantly. Every possible thing that could go wrong. Every way I could lose you." Evelyn took his face in her hands. "Listen to me. I'm strong. Stronger than I was when I first came here. You made me that way, and I'm not going to die because I refuse to leave you alone on this mountain." "You can't promise that." "No, I can't. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to stay alive, for you and for this baby." She placed his hand on her stomach where the baby had started moving. "Feel that? That's our child, fighting to be here. We're both fighters, Silas. We're going to be okay." He closed his eyes, and a tear tracked down his weathered cheek. "I'm so scared." "I know. Me too." They sat like that until the sun set, holding each other while the fear settled between them like something they'd have to learn to live with. The next day, Silas started preparing in earnest. He rode down to a town 20 miles south, farther than Black Ridge, where nobody knew them, and came back with medical books, clean cloth, instruments for emergencies. He studied those books like his life depended on it, memorized every stage of labor, every complication, every solution. He made Evelyn walk every day to keep her strong, made her eat even when she wasn't hungry, watched her like a hawk for any sign of trouble. It would have been suffocating if she didn't understand where it came from. "You're going to drive yourself crazy," she told him one afternoon while he was reorganizing their medical supplies for the 3rd time. "Probably." "Silas, I need to do this, Evelyn. I need to know I did everything I could to prepare. If something happens and I wasn't ready—" He stopped, jaw clenched. "I can't live with that." So she let him prepare, let him build and organize and study because it was the only way he knew how to fight the fear. Summer passed into fall, and Evelyn grew larger. Moving became difficult. Her back ached constantly. Her feet swelled. She felt like a different person inhabiting her own body, awkward and ungainly. But the baby was strong, active. She'd lie awake at night feeling it move, feeling this tiny life they'd created without meaning to, and wonder what kind of person it would become. Silas would rest his hand on her stomach and talk to the baby sometimes, his voice soft and wondering. "You're going to have your mother's stubbornness," he'd say. "Poor thing. But at least you'll get her strength too. That's not a bad trade." Those moments made everything worth it. Winter came early that year. By November, snow was already falling regularly, and Evelyn was massive. The midwife from the distant town had visited once in September, examined Evelyn, and declared everything looked normal. But she'd also warned them that she wouldn't be able to make it up the mountain once the heavy snows started. "You're on your own after this," she'd said bluntly. "Baby's due in December, and these mountains get impassable by then. Your husband know what he's doing?" "He's studied," Evelyn had answered. "Studied and done are different things. But you look healthy enough. First babies take their time usually. Just keep her warm and fed, and don't let her panic if labor goes long." She'd left them with instructions and supplies and a warning to send for her immediately if anything seemed wrong before the snows came. Then December arrived, and with it came the storms. They were snowed in by the second week, the cabin buried under drifts that came up to the windows. Evelyn could barely move now, her belly so large she had to waddle to get anywhere. Every night she went to bed wondering if this would be the night. Every morning she woke up relieved and disappointed in equal measure. Silas barely slept. He'd doze in the chair near the fire, jerking awake at every sound she made. His face had gone haggard with exhaustion and fear. "You need to rest," Evelyn told him. "I will. After." "Silas, I can't, Evelyn. Don't ask me to." So she didn't. The labor started on a Tuesday, 3 weeks before the calendar said the baby was due. Evelyn woke at dawn with a pain that started in her lower back and wrapped around her entire middle like a vice. She lay there breathing through it, waiting to see if it would pass. It didn't. 20 minutes later, another one came, then another. "Silas," she said quietly. He was awake instantly. "What's wrong?" "I think it's time." She watched all the color drain from his face, watched him take a breath and force himself to focus, to remember everything he'd studied and prepared for. "Okay," he said, and his voice only shook a little. "Okay, let's get you to the bed." The first few hours weren't bad. The pains came regularly but manageable. Silas timed them, measured the intervals, checked her constantly with hands that trembled despite his attempts to stay calm. "You're doing good," he kept saying. "You're doing so good." By afternoon, the pains had intensified. Evelyn couldn't talk through them anymore, could only grip the bed frame and breathe until they passed. Silas stayed beside her, wiping her face with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement that she barely heard. "How much longer?" she gasped during a brief respite. "I don't know. Could be hours still. First babies are slow." Hours. She didn't know if she could do hours of this, but she didn't have a choice. Night fell, and the labor continued. The pains came closer together, longer, harder. Evelyn screamed through some of them, past the point of caring about dignity or control. She was being split apart from the inside, her body doing something she had no power to stop. Silas checked her progress with shaking hands. "You're close. I can feel the baby's head. You're so close, Evelyn." "I can't." "You can. Just a little longer." But it wasn't a little longer. It was hours more of agony that blurred together into one endless nightmare. Evelyn lost track of time, of everything except the pain and Silas's voice cutting through it. "Push! Come on! Push!" She pushed until she thought something would tear. Pushed until she had nothing left. Pushed until she wanted to give up and beg for it to be over. And then finally, impossibly, she felt something give. The pressure released all at once, and a thin, angry wail filled the cabin. Evelyn collapsed back against the pillows, gasping for air, barely able to process what had just happened. Silas was crying, actually crying as he wrapped the baby in clean cloth and cut the cord with trembling hands. "It's a girl," he said, his voice breaking. "Evelyn, we have a daughter." He placed the tiny bundle in her arms, and Evelyn looked down at the red, wrinkled face of her child. Their child. This impossibly small person who'd just fought her way into the world. "Hi," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, baby." The baby's eyes were squeezed shut, her mouth open in another cry. She had dark hair plastered to her head and tiny fists that waved in the air like she was fighting something invisible. "She's perfect," Silas said, sitting on the edge of the bed. His hand was shaking as he touched the baby's head. "She's so perfect. Is everything? 10 fingers, 10 toes, breathing good. She's healthy." He looked at Evelyn, and she'd never seen such raw emotion on his face. "And so are you. You did it. You're both alive." The relief that crashed over him was almost physical. He dropped his head to Evelyn's shoulder and sobbed, great heaving sobs that he'd been holding back for months. Evelyn held their daughter with one arm and stroked Silas's hair with her other hand, crying herself because they'd made it. Against all odds, through all the fear, they'd made it to the other side. When Silas finally pulled himself together, he looked at the baby again with wonder in his eyes. "What should we name her?" he asked. Evelyn thought about everything that had led to this moment. The mountain that had almost killed her, but had given her everything instead. The winter that had tried to break them, but had made them stronger. "Lily," she said. "She came through the worst winter, and she survived, like a flower that blooms in the snow." Silas smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. "Lily Boone, I like that." He helped Evelyn get cleaned up and settled while the baby, Lily, nursed for the first time. It was awkward and painful and beautiful all at once. Evelyn felt like she was learning a language she didn't speak, but Lily seemed to know what she was doing, latching on with surprising strength. "She's stubborn already," Silas observed, watching them. "She gets it from both of us." "Poor thing doesn't stand a chance then." They laughed, punchy with exhaustion and relief. That night, with Lily sleeping between them in the cradle Silas had built, They lay together in the firelight. "I thought I'd lost you," Silas said quietly. "There were moments during the labor when I thought, but you didn't. We're here, all three of us." He pulled her closer, careful of her battered body. "I've been so focused on being terrified that I forgot to be grateful. But I am. For you, for her, for this life we've built. Even though it's not what you planned, especially because of that." He kissed her forehead. "You gave me a reason to stop just surviving and start living again. That's everything." Evelyn looked at their daughter, at this tiny person who'd changed everything, and felt something settle deep in her bones. She'd come to this mountain broken and desperate, believing she was worthless. And now she was a wife, a mother, someone who mattered. The town had been wrong about her. They'd all been wrong. And she'd spent the rest of her life proving it. Lily was 6 weeks old when the first woman showed up. Evelyn was outside hanging laundry, a task that took 3 times as long now with all the baby's cloths, when she heard boots crunching through the snow. She turned, half expecting Silas back early from checking traps, and instead found a stranger standing at the edge of the clearing. The woman looked to be in her 30s, thin and weathered, with a bruise yellowing along her jawline. She carried a small pack and had the hunted look of someone who'd been running for a while. "This the Boone place?" she asked, her voice rough. "It is," Evelyn said carefully. "Can I help you?" "Maybe. I heard—" The woman stopped, like she wasn't sure how to continue. "I heard there was a woman living up here, one who survived when everyone said she wouldn't. That true?" Evelyn set down the wet cloth she'd been holding. "Depends on who's asking. Name's Margaret Webb. I came from a town about 40 miles east. My husband—" She touched the bruise on her face. "He's not a good man, and I've got nowhere else to go. Someone told me you might understand that." Something in Evelyn's chest tightened. She knew that look, had worn it herself not that long ago. "Wait here," she said. She found Silas in the barn, and when she explained the situation, his first reaction was caution. "We don't know her," he said. "Could be anyone. She's running from something. Look at her face." "That's not our problem." "It could be." Evelyn met his eyes. "What if someone had turned me away when I needed help? Where would I be?" Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "You want to help her?" "I want to at least hear her out. This opens a door we might not be able to close." "I know." He studied her face, then nodded. "All right, but we're careful about this. She stays one night. We see if her story holds up. Then we decide." Margaret's story held up because it was too raw to be anything but true. She told them about a husband who drank, who hit, who'd put her in bed for a week after she burned his dinner. About running in the middle of the night with nothing but what she could carry. About sleeping in barns and walking through snowstorms because going back meant dying eventually. "I heard people talking in a trading post," Margaret said, warming her hands by the fire. "About a woman who climbed a killer mountain for work, who married the hermit everyone said was crazy, who had a baby in the middle of winter with no doctor and lived to tell about it. They said if anyone understood what it meant to survive when you're not supposed to, it was Evelyn Boone." Evelyn felt something shift in her chest. She hadn't realized her story had traveled that far, hadn't thought about what it might mean to other women who needed hope more than they needed judgment. "You can stay," she said before Silas could object. "There's a storage area we can convert. It's not much, but it's shelter." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I can work. I'm good with my hands. I can cook, clean, whatever you need. We'll figure it out. For now, you need to rest." Silas caught Evelyn's arm as she passed him. "You sure about this?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." Margaret stayed, and 2 weeks later another woman showed up. Then another. By the time Lily was 4 months old, there were 5 women living in various structures around the main cabin. Silas had built additional shelters, rough but functional, and the mountain settlement had started to take shape. Some of the women were running from violence. Others were widows with nowhere to go. One was barely 16, pregnant and alone after her family had disowned her. They came because they'd heard about the woman who'd survived Black Ridge's judgment and built a life anyway. They came because they had nowhere else. And Evelyn couldn't turn them away. "This is getting complicated," Silas said one evening after they'd put Lily to bed. "We're feeding 7 people now. Winter's going to be hard. I know. And if word gets back to Black Ridge, let it get back. What are they going to do? They already think the worst of us. Silas ran a hand through his hair. I'm not saying don't help them. I'm saying we need a plan. We can't just keep taking in everyone who shows up. Why not? Because eventually we'll run out of resources, food, space, patience. Something's going to give. Evelyn knew he was right, but she also knew what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and the thought of turning away someone who needed help made her stomach turn. Then we figure out how to get more resources, she said. We teach them to trap, to hunt, to survive up here. We build more cabins. We make this work. You're talking about creating a whole community. Maybe that's exactly what I'm talking about. Silas looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head with something that might have been admiration. You realize you're insane, right? I learned from the best. He pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. All right, we'll make it work, but I'm setting some rules. The rules were simple. Everyone who stayed had to contribute, learn to trap, to gather, to prepare for winter. No one got a free ride, and no one sat idle while others worked. The mountain didn't care about your sob story. It would kill you just as dead whether you deserved sympathy or not. The women learned quickly because they had to. Margaret turned out to be good with a rifle. Sarah, a widow from a mining town, knew how to preserve food better than anyone Evelyn had ever met. The pregnant girl, whose name was Anne, had a gift for working with leather. They built a community out of necessity and survival, and it worked better than it had any right to. By the time Lily turned 1, there were 12 women living on the mountain. They'd built 6 cabins, established trap lines, put in a garden that somehow survived the brutal growing season. They traded pelts and preserved foods with towns far enough away that Black Ridge's reputation didn't reach. And slowly, the mountain transformed from a place of isolation into something that looked almost like home. But Black Ridge hadn't forgotten about them. The confrontation came in Lily's second summer. Evelyn was in the garden with 2 of the other women when she heard horses. Multiple horses. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and watched 6 men ride into the clearing. Her uncle was leading them. The sheriff was there too, along with 4 men Evelyn recognized as prominent citizens of Black Ridge. They all had the self-righteous look of people who'd convinced themselves they were doing something noble. Silas appeared from the barn, rifle in hand but not raised. You're on private property, he called out. State your business or leave. Gerald dismounted, trying to look reasonable. We're not here to cause trouble, Boone. We just want to talk. About what? About what you're doing up here. He gestured around the clearing at the cabins, the women who'd stopped working to watch. We've heard reports. Women disappearing from their homes, ending up in this place. People are concerned. Concerned, Evelyn repeated, walking forward. That's interesting, considering none of you gave a damn when I was desperate and alone. Evelyn, this isn't about you anymore. This is about... Gerald struggled for words. About what this looks like. A known recluse, gathering vulnerable women in the mountains. You have to see how that appears. It appears like we're surviving, which is more than you offered any of us. The sheriff stepped forward. Mrs. Boone, we've had complaints. Families saying their daughters or wives have gone missing, that they've been taken up here against their will. Against their will, Evelyn said flatly. You want to ask them yourself? Margaret! Margaret appeared from one of the cabins, wiping her hands on her apron. She saw the men, and her whole body went rigid. You know any of these men? Evelyn asked. That one. Margaret pointed to a man on the far left. He's my husband's brother. Came looking for me 3 months after I left. The man shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. Did he find you? Evelyn asked. He found me in a trading post, tried to drag me back, said my husband deserved another chance. Margaret's voice hardened. I told him if he touched me, I'd kill him. Haven't seen him since. And are you here against your will? No, ma'am. I'm here because it's the first place I've felt safe in 5 years. The sheriff looked uncertain now. We still need to verify. Verify what? Another woman stepped forward, Sarah, the widow. That we're all here because we chose to be? That we're working and surviving and not hurting anyone? What exactly do you need to verify, Sheriff? One by one, the women gathered, 12 of them, standing together in a line that said they weren't going anywhere. Gerald looked at Evelyn. You can't keep doing this. You can't just collect every desperate woman who shows up and expect no consequences." "What consequences?" Evelyn shot back. "We're not breaking any laws. We're not stealing. We're living on land Silas owns and surviving the only way we know how. If that threatens you, that's your problem, not ours. It sets a bad precedent. Women running away from their obligations." "Obligations?" Evelyn's voice cut like a knife. "You mean like staying with men who beat them? Or accepting poverty because society decided they're worthless without a husband? Those obligations? That's not what I—" "Yes, it is. That's exactly what you mean. You want us to go back to being powerless and quiet and dependent. Well, we're not doing that. Not anymore." The sheriff raised a hand. "Look, nobody's saying you have to leave, but there are concerns about the children." "Children?" Evelyn's heart kicked. "There's a pregnant girl here, Ann Carter. Her parents filed a complaint. They want her returned." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "She's 18. She doesn't have to go anywhere." "Her parents disagree. They say she's been coerced." "Then ask her." Anne appeared, 7 months pregnant now, her belly round under her worn dress. She looked terrified but stood her ground. "Anne," the sheriff said, his tone gentle, "your parents are worried about you. They say you left without warning, that you might be in danger up here." "I left because they told me I was a disgrace," Anne said quietly, "because the baby's father ran off, and they said I'd ruined the family name. They wanted to send me away where no one would see me. Here, at least people don't treat me like I'm something shameful." "But are you safe? Safer than I've ever been." Anne's voice strengthened. "These women taught me how to survive, how to prepare for the baby, how to believe I might actually be worth something. My parents never did that." The sheriff looked uncomfortable. The other men shifted in their saddles. This wasn't going the way they'd expected. "This is wrong," one of the men said. Anne's father, Evelyn realized. "She's my daughter. She belongs with her family." "She's an adult," Evelyn said. "She belongs wherever she chooses. You've poisoned her mind, turned her against us." "I've given her a choice. That's not the same thing." Lily started crying from inside the cabin. She'd been napping, but the raised voices had woken her. Evelyn felt torn between continuing this fight and going to her daughter. Silas made the decision for her. "You've said your piece," he told the men, his voice hard. "Now leave, all of you, before I decide you're trespassing, and act accordingly." "Is that a threat, Boone?" "It's a promise. You've got no legal standing here. These women are adults who made their own choices. You don't like it, take it up with a judge. But you're not taking anyone from this mountain against their will." The standoff lasted another tense minute. Then Gerald shook his head and remounted his horse. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is," Evelyn replied. "You just don't know it yet." They rode out, and the women stood together until the sound of hooves faded completely. That night, gathered around a large fire outside the main cabin, they made a decision. "We need to make this official," Margaret said, "legal, so they can't come back and claim we're doing something wrong." "How?" Sarah asked. "We form a cooperative, file it with the territory, make it clear that this is a business venture, not some kidnapping operation." Evelyn looked at Silas, who nodded slowly. "It could work. We're already trading. We could expand that, make it legitimate." "And we teach the skills," Anne added, "not just to survive, but to thrive. Trapping, leatherwork, preserving, we could sell those goods and services." Over the next few months, they did exactly that. They filed paperwork forming the Mountain Women's Cooperative. They established trade relationships with distant towns. They built more structures, not just cabins now, but workshops and storage facilities. The women who came brought their own skills, and those skills combined into something more powerful than any of them had been alone. Word spread differently now, not as gossip or scandal, but as opportunity. Women started arriving not just fleeing something, but seeking something. A place where their worth wasn't determined by a husband or family approval, where they could work hard and keep what they earned, where their children could grow up learning that survival and strength mattered more than reputation. By the time Lily was 5, the mountain settlement had 28 residents. They'd built a small schoolhouse where Anne, who'd given birth to a healthy daughter 3 years earlier, taught the children. They had a trading post that did steady business. They'd even hired a traveling doctor who came up quarterly to check on everyone. It wasn't paradise. There were still hard winters, conflicts between women used to fighting for scraps, moments when the work felt impossible and the isolation crushing. But it was theirs. One evening, Evelyn sat on the porch watching Lily play with the other children. Her daughter was fearless, climbing trees and wrestling with kids twice her size. She'd inherited Silas's stubbornness and Evelyn's determination, and the combination made her absolutely unstoppable. Silas came out and sat beside her, his hair more gray now than brown, his face lined from years of mountain weather. But he smiled more easily these days. The grief that had defined him for so long had faded into something softer. "You ever think about what would have happened if you'd never come here?" he asked. "Sometimes. I probably would have died in Black Ridge, starved or frozen or just given up." "You wouldn't have given up. That's not who you are." "I didn't know who I was back then. I just knew I was desperate." "And now?" Evelyn looked around at the community they'd built, at the women working together, the children playing, the smoke rising from multiple chimneys. "Now I know exactly who I am and what I'm capable of. You changed everything, not just for yourself, for all of them. We changed everything. I couldn't have done this alone." Silas took her hand. "Remember when I told you I thought I was done with people? That I'd never let anyone close again?" "I remember. I was so wrong. Letting you in, letting all of this in, it saved me, gave me a reason to live instead of just survive." Lily ran up to them, breathless and covered in dirt. "Mama, can we build a fort tomorrow? A real one, with walls and everything?" "We'll see. You need to finish your chores first." "But, Mama—" "Chores first, then we'll talk about forts." Lily pouted but ran off to continue playing. Evelyn watched her go, feeling that familiar tightness in her chest that came from loving someone so much it scared you. "She's going to change the world someday," Silas said quietly. "Probably. She's too stubborn not to. Wonder where she gets that from." Evelyn smiled. Years continued to pass, and the settlement grew. By the time Lily was 10, there were 43 people living on the mountain, including 15 children. They'd expanded the school, built a proper infirmary, established relationships with 3 different towns for trade. And then one day, a messenger arrived from Black Ridge. Gerald was dying. "Cancer," the messenger said. He'd asked to see Evelyn before the end. Silas offered to come with her, but Evelyn went alone. Some things needed to be faced without backup. Black Ridge looked smaller than she remembered. The buildings seemed shabbier, the streets narrower. She walked through town and people stared, but differently now, with something that might have been respect mixed with their curiosity. Gerald's house was on the edge of town, exactly where it had always been. Evelyn knocked, and his wife, a woman Evelyn had never met, answered and led her to a bedroom that smelled like sickness and resignation. Her uncle looked ancient, gray and thin and barely there, but his eyes were alert when he saw her. "Evelyn," he rasped, "you came. You asked. Wasn't sure you would, after everything." She pulled a chair up beside the bed. "What did you want to say?" Gerald was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I was wrong. About you. About everything. I thought you'd be a burden, someone I'd have to carry. Never occurred to me you might be strong enough to carry yourself. I wasn't, not when I first arrived. But you became strong. Built something up there that people talk about all over the territory. Women helping women, creating something out of nothing." He coughed, the sound wet and painful. "That took courage I never had. You could have helped me when I needed it. I know, and I'll die knowing I failed you when it mattered. I just wanted to say—" Another cough. "I'm sorry. For all of it. You deserved better than I gave you." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't sad tears. They were relief, the kind that came from finally hearing words you'd needed for years. "Thank you," she said quietly. "How's your daughter?" "She's wonderful, stubborn and brave and everything I never was at her age." "You were brave. I just couldn't see it." Gerald died 2 days later, and Evelyn attended the funeral. People from town approached her afterward, asking questions about the mountain settlement. Several women, younger ones mostly, asked if there was room for more. "There's always room," Evelyn told them, "if you're willing to work for it." 3 of them showed up the following week. The settlement continued to grow, And with it came changes Evelyn hadn't anticipated. Some women eventually left, returned to families, married, moved to other opportunities. New women arrived, children grew up and made their own choices about staying or leaving. The mountain wasn't a prison, it was a choice. And Evelyn made sure everyone understood the difference. When Lily turned 15, she asked her mother a question that had clearly been building for a while. "Mama, why do people in town call you the woman who changed the mountains?" They were working together in the garden, pulling weeds in the late summer heat. Evelyn sat back on her heels and considered the question. "Because when I came here, people said I'd die, that the mountain would kill me, or the isolation would break me, or I'd give up and crawl back to civilization. But I didn't. I survived. And once I proved I could survive, other women started believing they could too. But it's not just about surviving, is it? It's about building something." That's exactly right. Survival is just the beginning. What matters is what you do after you survive. Lily pulled a stubborn weed, examining its roots. The kids at school, some of them talk about leaving when they're older, going to cities, finding different lives. That's their choice. Nobody has to stay here. "Would you be sad if I left?" Evelyn looked at her daughter, this fierce, brilliant girl who'd grown up so different from how Evelyn had. "I'd be sad to miss you, but I'd be proud that you had the courage to choose your own path. That's what this place is about. Not keeping people trapped, but giving them the strength to decide who they want to be." "What if I want to stay?" "Then you stay, and you help make this place even better than it is now." Lily smiled. "I think I want to stay, at least for a while. There's still a lot to learn." There always is. Years passed. Lily grew into a woman who combined her mother's compassion with her father's practical strength. She became a teacher, then a leader within the cooperative, helping shape policies and expand their reach. Silas grew older more gracefully than Evelyn expected. He's still trapped, though not as far into the mountains anymore. He spent more time with the children, teaching them wilderness skills and telling stories about the early days when it was just him and Evelyn against the world. And Evelyn became something she'd never imagined she could be. A leader, a symbol, the living proof that being rejected by one world didn't mean you couldn't build another. When she was 53, a writer from back east came to the mountain wanting to tell her story. Evelyn agreed, but only on one condition. "It's not just my story," she said. "It's the story of every woman who climbed this mountain looking for something better. Make sure you tell their stories too." The article ran in newspapers across the country. It brought more attention, more women, more opportunities. The cooperative expanded into manufacturing, into education, into political advocacy for women's rights. But through all of it, Evelyn never forgot where she'd started. She never forgot what it felt like to stand in Black Ridge with nothing, believing she was worthless. One evening in her 60s, Evelyn stood in the same clearing where she'd first delivered supplies to Silas all those years ago. The cabin was still there, though they'd added onto it several times. The mountain looked the same, eternal, unchanging. But everything else had transformed. Lily approached, now in her 30s with children of her own. "Mama, what are you thinking about?" "About how far we've come. How much has changed. Do you ever regret it? Staying here instead of finding an easier path?" Evelyn considered the question seriously. There wasn't an easier path. Not for me. This was the only way I could become who I needed to be. "And who's that?" Evelyn smiled. "Someone who knows her own worth, regardless of what anyone else thinks." "That's what you taught all of us. That's what the mountain taught me. I just passed it along." Silas joined them, moving slower now but still steady. He put his arm around Evelyn's shoulders, and she leaned into him the way she'd been doing for decades. "You two getting sentimental?" he asked. "Maybe a little," Evelyn admitted. "Well, stop it. We've got work to do." But he was smiling when he said it. The settlement continued long after Evelyn and Silas were gone. Lily and her children carried it forward, expanding and adapting as the world changed around them. The Mountain Women's Cooperative became an institution, a model that other communities studied and replicated. And at the heart of every new initiative, every expansion, every success, was a simple truth that Evelyn had discovered in her darkest moment. That survival wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest or the most prepared. It was about refusing to believe that you were worthless just because someone said you were. It was about climbing the mountain even when everyone said you'd fall. It was about building something new when the old world rejected you. And it was about understanding that sometimes the place that's supposed to destroy you becomes the place where you finally discover who you really are. Black Ridge eventually faded into history, just another forgotten frontier town that had served its purpose and disappeared. But the mountain settlement thrived, generation after generation, built on a foundation of women who'd been told they were nothing and had proven the world spectacularly wrong. And if you stood in that clearing on a quiet evening, listening to the wind through the pines and the distant sound of children playing, you could almost hear Evelyn's voice on the breeze, not telling you what to do or who to be, just reminding you that you're stronger than you think, and that sometimes the wilderness is the safest place to find yourself.